I'm going to introduce Cody Robinette to you. His bio says that he has spent the last 4 years trying to change the face of attorney-client relationships through his private law practice. It is his goal to stand out from other attorneys by viewing his practice as a service first and a business second. Mr. Robinette began his firm in Plano, Texas in 2012, servicing small businesses from starting up to walking them through a wide variety of issues, including composing service contracts, resolving consumer disputes, changing and filing business entity formats, and even navigating his client through a nationwide patent lawsuit in 2013. Aside from small business representation, Mr. Robinette spent much time creating and negotiating consumer contracts, including negotiating a multi-million-dollar real estate lease for alternative energy production. Opting to relocate his business to Seymour, Texas in late 2014, Mr. Robinette's practice has expanded to cover a wider variety of legal issues such as criminal defense, estate planning, and real estate transactions. You got to do it all in a small town. Mr. Robinette is a 2009 graduate of Abilene Christian University with a bachelor's degree in business administration and a 2012 graduate of Texas Wesleyan School of Law, now Texas A&M School of Law, in downtown Fort Worth. He is a loving husband of 6 years to his wife Jenna, and proud father to his new son, Carter. When he is not at the office, Mr. Robinette can most likely be found either with his family or at the Seymour Church of Christ, where he serves as the church youth minister and director of the community's after-school program. So please welcome Cody Robinette.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you sharing your lunch hour with me, and I hope that what I can do today is to help you through some of the basics of understanding a good way to set up your business that can help you succeed, that can give you a lot of flexibility in what you'd like to do, and to really put a personal fingerprint on what you'd like to make your business. As Linda said, I started out doing fun attorney stuff in the Metroplex, and my wife and I kind of said that's a little bit further away from our family, and we wanted to get back to places where life was a little bit more simple, and we knew that as I was transferring my law practice over, that's going to mean that I have to expand to do a lot more things that either I've never done before or maybe outside of my comfort zone. But what I'd like to show you is through that move, of course, I can tailor my business to what exactly I want it to be, and that's a great benefit of being a business owner. And I can still be selective in what I can do. In what I don't want to do, I can just decline to do that. Pretty much what I'll do is as we're walking through kind of the details of what an LLC is, I'll use my own business as an example of it as well. Because I filed an LLC for my business. That's the entity choice that I chose to set up. And with a small change, it just has to be a professional LLC. So before I get started, thank you for those that are on the live feed joining us too. Thank you for spending your lunchtime with us. And there's my disclaimer. You know, I've got to be an attorney here, right? If you have questions about your personal situation, always talk to your attorney and your CPA. You know, we're going to keep things mostly at a 30,000-foot level today. And anything that has to do with your personal situation, it's good to have somebody spend that time with you to discuss it, to analyze it. And like I said, CPAs are great for that too. I very, very often, most of the time, refer any kind of my tax questions to CPAs. If somebody's doing a practice that they have dedicated their career to understand tax law, first of all, more power to them. You know, if you want to spend your 9 to 5 reading through the Internal Revenue Code, you've got to have respect there. But also, they are going to be equipped with a lot more knowledge than I have about very specific details. So there's that. Now, first of all, LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. You may hear people refer to it as a Limited Liability Corporation. That's not exactly right. It's different from a corporation. A limited liability company is a company structure in itself. And I think it's a great option for people who want to start and maintain their own small businesses. mostly because it is more of a hybrid format to give you a lot of flexibility in what you'd like to elect to do, as well as to give you some structure and protection to a lot of small business owners that say, you know, I've got this business that's up and running and that's great, but I'm worried that if something happens, because they call them accidents for a reason, they're not on purposes. When that accident does happen, I don't want to be personally on the hook. And that's one of the greatest benefits that an LLC can provide. Like I said, this is a hybrid between a corporation and a partnership. You can maintain a level of ownership, management, hands-on control that you'd like, while at the same time getting that a little bit separate entity like a corporation and the way it can be set up and structured. Let's see, so what you need to know is the owners of the LLC are called members. There's a difference between members and managers, and we'll touch on that a little more here in a second. But the members, if they would like to, they can participate. If members don't want to participate and have an active say in what's going on with their company, that's their choice too. And that's what's great about this. That they can make all their decisions that they want to, or can decide to shut that for a time being. So also, you get an opportunity to elect how you would like your company to be taxed to a certain degree. I promise you there's not an option that says I would not like to be taxed. Trust me, I've looked, it's not there. But you can have some flexibility on if you're a sole owner, if you're a single member LLC, you can decide to file that with your personal taxes. If you've got several partners in there, you can decide to have it taxed as a partnership. It gives you that flexibility to choose, and that's something that you need to talk to your CPA about. Different things to consider if you would like, when you start up your business, what things should you always consider as any kind of business, and what kind of things should you consider when you're thinking about an LLC. The first thing is taxation that we just talked about. There's that flexibility option there. The second thing is the liability protections. There's a shield that guards you from, generally, if your business takes on some kind of action that causes somebody else to be upset, then you are not automatically on the hook. Now, there's certain exceptions that we can talk about here in a minute. But in the eyes of the law, an LLC is a separate entity from its owner, even a single member LLC. That's why I chose to do that, because I knew that if somebody doesn't like the advice that I gave, something goes south, if they want to take on trying to reach whatever assets to recover their claim for damages, they're not going to be able to touch mine with a certain few exceptions. I mean, unless I do something really bad. But that's the main benefit why people elect this. There's a balance that you need to consider between how much am I willing to start up my company to get it off the ground versus how much ownership and control you'd like. That consideration is always there for any type of business that you select. And how much capital will you ultimately need to get off the ground? If you need venture capitalists that kick in some money to start up your company, that's available as an option to your LLC, but there are times that may lead you to decide LLC may not be the best. How much control, hands-on operations do you desire? And how are we going to set up voting rights, membership interests, and this is something we'll touch on more here in a minute. But that is subject to however much you want to make it. Because you are the owner of your company, you can set this up to where you can have a 1% interest and everybody else takes everything on. Or you can split it equally. However many partners are in there, get 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. The greatest benefit to that is called your operating agreement, which is your internal playbook. But we'll hit on that here in a minute. So what do we need to do to get an LLC going? There are certain filing requirements that if you're going to ask that the state see your business as a separate entity from you, you've got to let the state know. It makes sense. And it's called certificate of formation. The certificate of formation asks very skeletal and cursory questions that you don't have to give the details of what exactly it is that your business is doing. Basically, you just need to put your information on who the owner is, where the central office is going to be located, or I guess where the nucleus of your business is located. How is this structure? Is it going to be managed by the members, or are the members going to elect certain people to manage the day in and day out things? And also they need a registered agent. The registered agent, of course, is somebody who has to reside in the state of Texas, that if the lawsuit comes around, that's the person that's available to receive service of process to notify you. Now, that is, before I go on, I've left the notebook off the side of the room here that is kind of sample documents for you, so you can actually see what exactly is a certificate of formation. And that's available in the notebook. I have all other kinds of things that you can look at that were originally from my company, but I've kind of protected the private information on that. And if you'd like a copy to take with you, my understanding is that the SBDC will be able to make copies. I've allowed them to make copies of that, and they can distribute whatever you're looking for. Hopefully that helps you guys out some. Whenever you file the certificate of formation, it's a $300 filing fee made payable to the Texas Secretary of State. That is pretty much the only cost that is incurred when you are asking to set up your company. The second thing is an operating agreement. This is what I talked about. This is your company's internal playbook. This is considered, if you will, without any kind of personal comment to what it may be, but this is kind of your company's prenuptial agreement. We are great and we are fine as we are at the beginning, and everything is going well, and that's fantastic. But if something were to go south to where we as partners cannot agree, we have already made this agreement. We've already decided together how things are going to go down and how things work. This is mostly for your internal controls. However, there are going to be entities that would like to see this as well, such as a bank. Like when you're going to set up your bank account as your company rather than in your personal name, they're going to want to see who all has authorization to draw on this account, who can write checks, who can make deposits, who can open up a separate account that's connected to this, so on and so forth. And that's what goes in here, is here's the structure of how we want our business to set up. And it includes things kind of like, here are the members that are recognized. Here is the procedure of how to, if we're going to have a meeting to elect managers, here's how that goes. Here's how a formal meeting is called. Here is how many people have to vote in favor of whatever action it is to proceed with this proposal. I typically also include in there what happens if one of our partners dies, and what happens to that interest. Is it left up in the air, or does the interest go back to the company? How is that set up? Big point is this provides flexibility for favorable provision to all of your members. Again, if you want to set up to where you've got less control, you've got less responsibility on this company than somebody else, throw it in your operating agreement. The Texas law gives wide latitude for however you'd like to do this. Like I said, short of things like exempt from taxes. And finally, a lot of times an EIN number is required. Y'all know what an EIN number is? Y'all probably do, small business owners, but it's not always the case. You don't always need an EIN number. They're just considerations for whether you'd like to have that, of course, separate from your personal social security number. The governance of the LLC. As I mentioned before, the owners of the company are called members. Why? I'm not sure. But basically, the members are the ones that are ultimately in control. They are kind of the ones that act like your owners or your shareholders in a company, just with a little more hands-on direct control. Like I said, an LLC is typically something that's more of a small, closely held company than a corporation is. You can have single LLCs, that's what mine is. I'm the only owner of my business. Or you can have multiple member LLCs. You have 3, 4, 12 partners in there. Now the members in their operating agreement and in their certificate of formation may elect managers, which those are like the board of directors. They make, they're the ones that may make decisions. You can have the option to delegate that responsibility to those managers if you'd like. Or if you stay silent on it, then by default it says that the members are the ones that have the direct control over the company. You don't have to elect managers if you don't want to. Basically, whoever is the manager of the company, whether it stays in members and managers, they're the ones that are responsible for designating agents, right? Kind of an agency principle about who can we hold responsible for certain things, who are we giving authorization to make decisions on behalf of our company, who can we hold out to different vendors to be the ones to make the orders, who is the one that we can hold out to have service of process handled to you, just like they're called registered agent. Or, you know, they can designate even officers below them. They can designate who is going to be in charge below them. That's fine. Now, here's kind of a, you know, here's the fun part where lawyers kind of had a heyday with this. See the definition of person. All it says is that a member has to be a person. But what did they do? They said, well, a person could be a person, as you understand it, or it can be another LLC, or it can be a company, or it can be an organization, or it can be a trust, it can be an estate. So what does that definition not include? I'm not sure, because they didn't give the limit on what that doesn't include. So you can make that whatever you'd like. I've done several business setups to where basically we had a limited partnership, but one of the limited partners was an LLC. So you can combine that into each other. It doesn't even have to be, if you're an owner of the company, you don't even have to live in the state of Texas. If you decide to set your business up and file your business under the laws of the state of Texas, that doesn't mean the owners have to be there. It just means that the registered agent has to be there. But, like I said, see what I mean about flexibility? The state of Texas is kind of saying you can make whoever you want to be the owners of these companies. So here's that liability protection where a lot of people say, here's why I favor an LLC. General rule, a member is not personally liable for the debts of the company. So let's say that you're upside down in your company and you said, man, I have way too much credit that I'm not going to be able to pay back. If there are no other circumstances, then the debt is going to fall on the LLC itself and not on the members. The exceptions to those come if this is talking about like a debt, right? We're typically thinking about paying off loans, paying off investors, paying off equity interest, things like that. It doesn't fall off on the member unless there is a personal guarantee. And a lot of banks will require that to say, especially, you know, hey Cody, you've got an LLC that is a single member LLC. We have a hard time distinguishing the business from you. We want you, if you're going to take out this note, that's fine, but we're going to ask you to sign off on it that in case your business folds next week, we can guarantee that we're going to get payment from somebody. It kind of makes sense. The other exception is intentional or willful acts of misconduct. Like I said, you got to do something pretty bad, and usually that does not involve a move that would be typical of what that person does for the company. It's kind of a breach of fiduciary duty. Y'all know what breach of fiduciary duty is? Cool. Some of y'all do, some of y'all don't. Just kind of a quick rundown of what that is. A fiduciary duty is basically if you're going to be a member or an owner of a company, if somebody's going to allow you to be their business partner, you owe the company a duty of loyalty to do what you think is best and right for the business, and you've got to take that into consideration rather than being selfish and thinking about yourself first. You owe that duty to the business. So, you know, those intentional and willful acts of misconduct, a lot of times you'll find those in tort situations where you have car accidents, you have other kinds of non-criminal liability cases. that involve something that happened. Like I said, it's really bad. Either your employee decided to, instead of going to make his delivery, he decided to go off on a tangent, go to some other kind of trip that was not authorized by the company, and in doing so, he saw some little vehicle that, and he's driving his 18-wheeler, and he sees one of those little Toyota Priuses and says, "I just don't like Priuses," runs him over. The car's damaged, and then it's like, oh, well, yeah, you're going to be personally on the hook for that, not the business, because that was not within your scope of your duty as a business. So, like I said, there are very rare exceptions, and in those types of cases, when lawsuits are filed, they typically have to have permission from judges. It's called piercing the corporate veil, where they will ask. The circumstances necessitate that not only can the business not repay what I'm owed, but this goes on the person individually. Like I said, it's rare. It's pretty rare. So don't do anything that sets off your internal radar that says, "I probably shouldn't be doing this." That's where people get in trouble, is they ignore that radar. They just kind of flip it off or turn it to silent, and I'll just do it anyway. Here's the last thing that I have for consideration before we open it up to questions. State franchise taxes. The LLCs are subject to state franchise taxes. So as the law currently reads, this is a tax that's based on sales revenue, that the threshold right now is $1 million. If you're pulling in $1 million, then you're going to start to pay state franchise taxes. Now, there are two bills that passed the Senate in our recent 84th legislative session that ended in 2015 that passed. So it went to the Ways and Means Committee, and it's just kind of suspended when the session ended. So it'll be picked back up in 2017. So this is still on the table. Is that there's a rate cut. Just basically, it's a fraction of a percent difference. But just, you know, if you're pulling in over $1 million, then that's going to be a significant chunk of change to you. And the second one is that your threshold is raised from $1 million to $4 million. And like I said, this isn't law yet, but this could very well pass and become law here, you know, maybe 2017, maybe even beyond if they're still jarring it around. That's, like I said, I wanted to keep this kind of at a 30,000-foot overview of what an LLC is, and hopefully that helps you guys out. If anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer them. Anybody have anything that they'd like to ask? Yes, sir.
Under the formation step, how can you check or tell if the name hasn't been used already?
Good question. There is there's an email address on the Texas Secretary of State website that you can have a free inquiry to say, here's the idea that I have for my business name, and you know, because there's lawyers involved with that, they say you can't really depend on this to be accurate or true at the time that you file your paperwork, but we can give you a preliminary determination that's unofficial that says whether this name is currently taken or not. And that's usually a great first step to take before you try and file your paperwork and send off the $300, only for it to get rejected and say there is a company name that with this name, or a name that is quote unquote deceptively similar that caused us to reject this. So it's kind of an interesting standard of what deceptively similar is, but that's a good way. Like I said, it's on the Texas Secretary of State website. It has, if you want a name inquiry, here's the email address to send it to.
And will they typically do more than one name at a time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've shot 3 or 4 at one time. They're great. Turnaround time with the response is about 48 hours. They're really good at that. And you know, like I said, I've just kind of bullet pointed them to it. Just here's a name inquiry that I'd like to run, and here are the names of the business I'd like to check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Usually, kind of a good way, an easy way for us to make sure that it's not already taken, is I'll usually go to just Google search. I'll put the business name in there, and I'll put Texas at the end of it, because if a business has that name that's in Oklahoma, it doesn't matter. if they're filed in Texas, that's the only thing that can't conflict. So if I don't see anything on that Google search that says here's a company in Texas that already has that name, then we're probably gonna be good, but I just like that double check before I send in my certificate of formation for $300.
So continuing, so this is a Texas-based registration.
Yes, sir.
Is it good for the entire United States, so you can conduct business, say, in California under this name?
If you are gonna conduct business in California, you need to file some kind of recognition with that state individually. So everything that I've talked to you today is just about Texas.
Sure.
So if you're going, multi-state or even multinational, you gotta start filing in those places where you plan on having systematic contacts and business conduct in that activity.
So would it be possible to have the same name in 2 different states too?
You bet.
Okay.
You bet.
And it's okay?
Yeah, as long as there's, I can't give an opinion on what, for example, California's standard is, but, I would be willing to think that if there's not a company with that name already, then you're usually good. Now, if there is a company that already has that name, and you think, I gotta have this name, there is no negotiating it. It is reflected in me. Whatever it is, you can, basically, they can send a response to you to say there is a company by this name, but what you have to do is get kind of an authorized and certified consent from them to say either yes, you can borrow this name as well, or because they're probably enterprising little people at that place too, they would probably like to say, we can lease you this name, so you can use it if you pay us a royalty of however much money per year or whatever it is. But there is ways that even if it's taken, you can use the name as well. Yes, sir.
If you register a name, you have that R by it, does that cover you?
That is more into intellectual property law. So that's a national basis. So that doesn't have to do with filing a registration with the Secretary of State. So that's a different issue. And that is something that usually, if you've ever checked out any kind of intellectual property attorneys, that's usually what they do. That is their thing. And they don't do anything else. So they don't practice in Seymour, Texas. And because it's a pretty complex area of law. In fact, many of them have their engineering degrees, just because for some reason their brain clicks with that. But my gut tells me yes, it would protect you to, at least let me put it this way, it won't prevent somebody else from trying to file. If you have not filed your business name, you have the name protected in intellectual property, but you have not filed under the Secretary of State to say this is what my business is. Somebody else could do that before you jump in line, but then this is just going to be an intellectual property dispute to say, I already had this beforehand, but the state of Texas and the Secretary of State may or may not know the status of the protection of that.
Does the name ever expire? Like, it has to be renewed every period of time?
For your business, it does not expire. So here's one of the interesting things that's in your certificate of formation. There's another provision that's in there kind of towards the end that says, please state the purpose for which you intend to conduct business activity. I am telling you how flexible this is. It is a perfectly normal, routine and acceptable statement to say, I am forming this company to perform and conduct any and all lawful business activity. That's it. And they'll say, great. So the reason for that is, I would guess, so that they don't, if you're running your business, you go into the cattle industry the first year, and you say, man, this is not a good venture. Or, for whatever reason, you want to change the services you provide. You don't have to file necessarily any kind of amendment of your registration of business just because you're choosing to provide different services. It'll still continue as the existing entity. So if I can, I'm going to take your question to the next step. The next question is, how does it ever end? Oh, that's a filing to the state to say, you know, we've wound up the business, we've shut it down, so we don't want this to be recognized anymore. Whoever's behind me wants this name, get after it. Right. Right. Did I see a hand up here? Yes.
Is this something that an average business owner can file? Do we need to have a CPA or a lawyer?
You always need a lawyer. But it's not, here's what I'd say. The certificate of formation is easy enough that anybody can do it.
Okay.
It is designed on purpose not to be complex, because we don't want to slow down industry, right? We want people to be able to freely and easily do this to where they can make something their own. The operating agreement, that's definitely where I, you know.
Is there a template for that, or that's created solely on your own?
Which one?
The
operating agreement? I mean, I'm sure you could probably find a template online somewhere.
I mean, if I have a partnership agreement, you can just kind of reword that into an
It's
operating
close.
agreement.
It's close to the same. Yeah.
Are there additional costs past the 300? I had looked into a lawyer doing it for me, and it was about $1,300. Are there?
Was that the lawyer's fees that they were asking for, to say, here, you can give everything to me, I'll take care of it, and here's your final cost? I bet that's a bunch of lawyer fees that they stuck in there. Because, you know, what we're doing is as an attorney, we are writing your contract.
Right, probably.
And, you know, that's not something that we have a template for it and just throw in your name in there and ta-da, there it is.
Right.
It's got to work for you.
Right.
And it's got to be custom, and it's got to be something that's geared specifically to you. So that's what I'm saying.
I'm just wondering, if I have a partnership agreement already,
Right.
would it be something that I could easily do to save myself $1,000?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's no other fees besides that $300 filing fee?
Not to the state, no.
Okay.
Even your employee identification number, you know, for those of you that don't have one, you can do that online for free now.
Yeah, I'm ready.
And it's an immediate generation. Just bam, there's your EIN number. So that's typically whenever I file an LLC, that's the only fee that I see associated with it.
Okay.
And usually I like to separate them and say, look, you know, I tell my clients, right, so the first thing that Linda was reading about in my bio, I try to make this a little bit different, right? So I tell my clients, here's the fee that's associated with it that doesn't, this is not going into my pocket. Because I don't want to be the intermediary party to say, here, take this money, and then I'm gonna write the check to the Secretary of State. Rather, when it's ready to go, and I show them the certificate of formation, and I tell them, make sure I spelled everything correctly, make sure this is exactly how you wanted it, and then, when it's ready to go, we can send it off, but I need a check from you payable to the Secretary of State for $300, and we'll send it off. Just like I said, I just don't like to play middleman whenever I don't have to. But that is the $300 is the fee that I've seen associated with it, plus your postage stamp. You can fax it now even. Yes, ma'am.
So if we already have an EIN number for a partnership, you have to get a new EIN for an LLC? Or can it be the same?
I'm not going to pretend to know the answer off the top of my head, but I do, in the notebook that I have, it's kind of an EIN guideline. Do I need an EIN? What do I need to do with it? But that is also questions that I typically defer to CPAs on. Mostly when I'm on the line, right, because an EIN has to do with taxes, I consult that person's CPA on it and say, you know, hey, I don't want to do something that's going to put your neck on the line, because ultimately that question is going to come back to the CPA. So that's just a question I have for them. So I don't, like I said, I'm not going to know that one off the top of my head. Yes, ma'am.
We have a sole proprietorship, and I know you have to do the DBA every 2 to 10 years. With the LLC, do you still file the DBA?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
That's fine.
What I've seen is no. Typically not, because, like I said, you are then recognized across the state of Texas as a separate entity. That DBA is designed for, you know, your local purposes, that if you do something, you don't want this attached to you personally, that you're going to have some kind of separate entity that says, this is my business, you know, Sandra's Taco Stand, smiley face, or whatever, you know, that you want this associated with the taco stand itself and not you personally. So the LLC, it already has that there. Now, if you want to set up several sub-businesses or whatever, then maybe. I'm just gonna leave it at a maybe, okay? It just kind of depends on the specific situation.
So you file the fee with the state of $300, so you don't have, for the LLC, you don't have to do these.
Right,
Okay.
right. Okay, did I see another hand back over here?
I have a
Yes,
question. When you're, with rental properties, is there a limit of how many you can put in one name, or do you divide them all up to a certain amount, or how does that work?
I have not seen a limit on it. And that is, I think that is a great reason to file an LLC, because, you know, your renters aren't always, well, let's put it this way. Not all renters are always the most upstanding characters that take care of not only their property, but somebody else's property too. So, you know, if something goes wrong with the house that they're renting, you want that protection aside from you. Now, back to the question, I don't think there's a limit on how much you can do with that.
How does this complement or detract from like a C Corp or an S Corp?
Well, what do you mean?
Well, do you also form an S corporation too, or this takes the place of that?
So the C Corp and S Corp are corporations themselves.
Okay.
So that's a different type of entity, but I think in certain situations you can elect to have your company treated taxably
Right.
as an S Corp.
Under the LLC.
Correct. As the LLC, you can have it treated the same way on a tax basis as your S Corp. Now, some of the differences there is, you know, typically your LLCs are not subject to double taxation, meaning you're not going to get popped on your business and then you personally. But I think with an S Corp, there is some kind of taxation on both. That's more of a CPA question beyond that. Okay. Yes, sir.
Can you have several company names under one LLC?
Yes. Now, what I've seen is that you can make combinations of different entities. Remember the standard of deceptively similar names. You can do, let's take the dog food, Blue Buffalo, right? You can do Blue Buffalo Feed, and file a separate LLC for Blue Buffalo Services, file another one for Blue Buffalo Investments, because those have not been deceptively similar. Now, what you're talking about is doing like one LLC, like an umbrella company, and then below that having maybe like partnerships, sole proprietorships, things like that. You bet. And you can make in the setup of those companies, you know, you can make either like your LLC, like the silent partner, or somehow you can make those the revenue from that flow into your LLC. So yes, you can do umbrella setups with that. Yes, ma'am.
Can you change your current name if you have a LLC?
Yes, ma'am. If you want to change your name in it, that's it's another form on the Secretary of State's website that you can just take that template, fill it in, and just say, you know, here's the amendment that I'd like to do. It's just changing the name. All the other provisions are still the same. It's still the same members, still the same registered agent, still the same nucleus of the company. It's just changing the name. It didn't work for me, or you know, people. You know, maybe when they were typing it into Google, always got it confused with this other company over here. That's pretty easy. But of course, with doing that, the state's going to want some money from it. Yeah. Hey, right? This is all a money-making venture. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Actually, two questions, but they're related. What happens when you sell your business if it's an LLC, and what happens if you die while you are still operating this LLC?
Okay. By selling business, you mean so? If I can, let's set up a hypothetical for that. Let's say that we have my law practice that's single member. It's owned only by me, and I want to sell my law practice to somebody else. What we can do is that's just another one of those amendment forms. It's just to say, you know, the state is no longer going to recognize me when they send stuff. It's not going to be to me. It's not going to be. Basically, they're not going to come looking for me. that you can still keep the name, you can still keep the office, everything else is the same, except for now, instead of the member, you file an amendment to say, here's the new member of it. That one's fairly simple, with a short fee to the Secretary of State, as always. Now, what happens when a member dies? Let me give you an example. Here's how I usually set up the provision in my operating agreement, is that I have a section for what's called an exiting member. So whether the partner dies or whether they're just wanting to get out, I'm done with this, I'm going to retire, I want my cut of the business or whatever it is basically I treat it, we'll talk about specifically with when somebody dies, is that I give the company the right of first refusal to say, because this person was invested in the company has the right to buy out that interest first. But if the company declines to do that, then that member or the member's estate, in this case, can either sell it to somebody on a private basis or they can put it on the public market. But of course, when you do, that's a lot more hassle. You have to register it with the SEC and a lot more government involvement there. But that way, what it does is to protect the company's interests first, is that way you are not forced, if you have two partners with you, you are not forced to elect, or I guess to accept somebody who you didn't want as your partner. That you have the right to, if you want to buy back, if there's 3 partners and one of them dies off, you have 2 partners left, and instead of 33, 33, 33, or 34, however much you want to split that up, I mean, basically you can say, we're going to buy out that deceased partner's interest, and we can distribute those interests amongst us remaining partners, if we want to do that. Or if the company wants to buy it, and the company wants to be the one to manage the sale, they can do that too, and then just pay off the interest of the deceased member. Of course, there's going to be provisions in there for what is going to necessitate me making that payment. Well, we're going to be profitable first in months that we have a profit, and are able to make a distribution to our members. Then that necessitates a generation of payment. So in the months that we're having trouble and we're in the red and we're trying to make our ends meet, and we may or may not get there, but we don't take a distribution, then that doesn't necessitate. It's set that up the way that you'd like it in your operating agreement. You can do whatever you want to with it. Or if you can say, you know what, as our 3 partners, if one of us passes away, we do not want to mess with selling an interest. We don't want to mess with buying it back. You're free to do with it what you want. Set that up in your own will. And that can work too. So it's super flexible about how you'd like to create that.
Is there an extra step to do the LLC?
No, it's not an extra step. Basically, the requirement is if your business is of such a nature that it requires a professional licensure, then it's still going to be an LLC, but it just requires you to be a PLLC. And the stipulation on that too is that every member of your company, every owner, has to possess that same licensure. But it's not an extra step. It's just kind of I think it's just another format on your registration.
Can you change from an LLC to a PL? I mean, is that kind of going to be basically an amendment?
Right. It's not difficult. With small fee. Right. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I'm glad we can get together, and thank you for lending me your ear and for spending your lunchtime with me. I appreciate y'all inviting me here.
A couple of things. There is an evaluation form on your table. We would love for you to fill that out, give us some feedback. Also, there's a place for you to put down if there's any topics you're interested in for future sessions. We'd love to hear that from you too. If you did not put your email address on something when you signed in, we have a sheet. What that is, famous got it. You want to be sure and get your emails before you go. And we have the copies. If anybody needs a copy of some of the forms you was talking about, here, you can pick one up on your way out. Feel free to stay, visit. Thank you again for coming. And next month, our meeting is going to be on some of the issues with the Affordable Care Act. Boys, so be looking for some information on that coming out soon.